Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Paul Johnson, and I am a software solutions architect with Profit Business Group, and I've been with the organization for over 10 years. This webinar will provide you an understanding of what is the data model in Power BI and how to work with it. This webinar is geared towards the financial analyst role, and there will be some subject matter that is a little more technical in nature. This webinar is being recorded and chat is available to you, the audience, to ask questions. Chat is not being recorded. Our outcome for today is to bring structure to our data by modeling it. Here is a demonstration. So here's our Power BI file, desktop file that we started working with last webinar, where we retrieved some information from Dynamics GP, and it was the sales line items detailed data. So from there, I'm in the file at this point. I'm just going to click on this Edit Queries, and this is going to show us all of our steps that we went through to manipulate the data. So we started off by going to the source, and if I click on this gear box or gear icon next to source, I can actually change this if I wanted to point this to a different server. But as you can see, I can actually see all my steps. So we connected to PPG demo serve, certain database, and then next thing we retrieve data from a certain table and remove certain number of columns. So if I clicked on that gear icon, I would see, here's only the columns we wanted data from. So basically this applied steps is walking through each step that we went through to filter or manipulate our data in some fashion. We extracted the date, we appended some queries together, we inserted a year column and a month column, we changed data types on certain columns. So basically those are all the steps we went through. So from there, if I had missed a column, for example, I could easily just go to remove other columns, click on that gear icon and add a certain column, just check that off, and then it would get added into our data source here. So I'm going to start off by adding a new column. So I'm just going to go to the end here, and we're just going to select our document date column. And I'm going to go to add columns in the ribbon or toolbar at the top. And I'm going to click, I want to add a column. It's going to be a date type column, and I'm going to select quarter. I'm going to say quarter of the year. I'm going to hit OK. And it's going to insert that step. So from there, what it's going to do is if I now see here's the certain quarter of the year that particular document date pertains to. We're going to leave this as a whole number, but I could easily change the data type of this column. So I'm just going to change this to be a whole number at this point. And it's actually inserting those steps as to where I was in the thing. So I probably should be at the bottom, but it doesn't really matter at this point with this data, but I probably normally want to insert this at the bottom of my applied steps. We can set, as I just showed you, we can have different data types. So I can have, decimal number, whole number, date column, date and time, text column. So data types are important in how it sums data up, or is used as in a slicer as an example. So one of the things we'll want to do is in our year column that we have here, right now this is set to be a text column. We want this to be, like I indicated in slicers, we want this to be a text number for in a slicer versus being a whole number. An example of that I will show later. We can also do things like rename our queries. So as an example, I could easily right click on here and say rename and rename this query something else if I wanted to. The other thing we can do is organize our query. So for example, if I have a query here, I can right click on this and say move to a group, select a new group, and we can name this live queries as an example. And this is just a way to organize our queries a little better. So right now, as returns is another. We don't need that. And then we have our sales line items in our normal query. Something else we can do is to model our data is we can transform it by doing something called column splitting. So an example would be of this would be if we look at our data here, we have customer class, which basically starts with CAN dash or USA dash, or if we just scroll through here, as we can see, pretty much. So it could be New Zealand dash as an example. So I want to extract the country from this particular column. So I'm just going to start off by selecting that column, and I'm going to select add column, but I'm going to say column from examples. So when I do that, I'm just going to click on that. It's going to present me this nice little wizard type thing. I can just start typing in here. So I could just type in CAN as an example, hit Control Enter to apply that. So I'm just going to hit Control Enter. As you can see, it's giving me a representation of what sort of function it's going to apply. So it's going to return CAN, USA, and as you can see here, it's before delimiter, customer class. So anything before the dash is what it's returning to me. If I scroll down, I can see that New Zealand's going to return the proper value as well. So that's exactly what I want. So I'm just going to hit OK to that. And now I have a column with that information. And I can rename this column. We probably don't want it named that, so I'm just going to rename this country. And we are going to leave that as a text column, so that's going to be our text column. Some of the other types of transformations we can do are we can split a column by number of digits as an example. So I'm just going to click on, I can extract, a certain length of characters, or the first X number of characters, or range, or text before delimiter. These are all the types of transformations that could be applied to this particular or any column to get a new column. We can also convert data to be uppercase, lowercase. We could trim spaces off of certain columns. We could add a prefix or a suffix. All things you can do with transformations. We can also do something like conditional column. So if we wanted to add a new column that returned the, if a country was in North America or some other overseas somewhere, we could easily do that. So what I'm going to do is add a conditional column. So I'm under new column, and I'm going to click conditional column here. And this presents you with a nice little wizard. So I'm going to name this location as our new column, and I'm just going to click the drop down here and select country. So if a country equals CAN, which is for Canada, then we want to return North America, and we're going to add a new rule. Else, if country, similar thing, equals USA, then we're going to return North America again. Otherwise, we're going to return other as an example. And I'm just going to hit OK to this. So as you can see, it's added a new column for us. And if we just scroll down here, New Zealand's showing up as other. And so it's added a nice conditional column for us. We can also use something called query parameters. So on the Home tab, under my Power Query Editor, I can click on Manage Parameters, and I'm just going to create a new parameter that's going to be a date parameter that's basically going to filter our data based on the value of that parameter, so anything after that date will get returned. So I'm just going to click New Parameter, and I'm going to select or create a new parameter called Date. I'm just going to leave this with any value, and I'm going to set a current value of January 1st, 2018. So 1/1/2018. Hit OK. And as you can see, it's placed this under other queries. I like to organize these a little better, so I'm just going to right click and do the same thing we did with sales line items, which is move to a new group. And I'm going to call this parameters. And hit OK. As you can see, it's showing me my parameter value plus what the default current value of that parameter is. So that's perfect. That's what I want. I'm just going to go back to my sales line items. Now I'm going to apply that filter to my date column. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to click this drop down to apply a filter. And I'm going to select date filters, and I'm going to say custom filter. And then I'm going to select this calendar icon here, and I'm going to say equals parameter. And which parameter? Well, we only have one at the moment, which is dates. So I'm going to say, now I don't want this to be equals. I want to say after a certain date. So I'd want this to be after. Oh, there it is, after that specific date. I'm going to hit OK at this point. And as you can see, it's now only returning values that are after January 1st, 2018 to us that are applied in that filter, and it's created a step called filter rows. So that's just one way you can use parameters to when the Power Query steps are being applied to your source data. You can obviously set this and use that going forward. In using parameter queries, you could also set the server name and your database name with that. So once again, if I go to Manage Parameters and I create a new parameter, and we'll call this server as an example, and we'll put in a value of PBG demo server. And hit OK. So now when I go to, we'll move this into parameters. When I go into my sales line items and go to my source steps, at this point, instead of having this hard named, I could go parameter and set this to the server name, and then control. That way I'm not having to go in here. And also, if you're setting up lots of different connections, you can just use those one time, hard code them, and then you don't have to set it. So it saves a little bit of time there for you. I'm not going to do that though, so I'm just going to hit cancel to that step. Once we're done with the initial adding of extra columns or transforming our data, we can switch from the Power Query Editor back to Power BI Desktop. So just by clicking on this close and apply. So I'm going to hit close and apply. This will bring us back to our main page. I can also model data in the Power BI Desktop here just by clicking on the modeling tab. So I can do things like add a new measure, which I'll be covering, adding new tables. I can also go back to the home page and I can create a table with some data in it just manually. So I can or cut by cutting and pasting from Excel as an example. So I'm just going to hit edit, enter data here, and I'm going to create a new table. And we're going to base this table, we're going to add some extra information to our region information of North America or other. So I'm just going to create a new table called region at this point. And we're going to add some data in here. So I'm going to put North America as one of the values. And we're going to enter other. And I'm going to put the number of customers in each one of these locations, let's say, or it could be some other piece of information, doesn't really matter. Num of customers. So North America, we have 200 customers, and other we have 20 as an example. And I'm going to hit load. So what this has done is it's gone out and created another table for us called region. So if I click on that and click on tables and go back to region, as you can see, here's our table with data in it. One of the other things is relationships or models. So by clicking on this model tab here, I'm going to see that we have our sales line items table. And now we have our regions table. And it's also created a relationship between our locations and this other table. So it's actually found two columns with the same name and created a relationship between those. So if I was to right click here and go to properties on this relationship, I can see that location is joined to location, and it's many to one relationship. So this is creating we're now bringing structure to this data. We're creating other pieces of information associated with that may be associated with our regions. We could add extra columns where we may not want to have to go into each one of these sales line items tables and add that piece of information. So it's just an easier way for us to join data, be it from different data sources, and creating a data model off of that information. Something else we can do that I normally do, instead of working with the date column in the sales line items table, we're going to create our own date table. The reason we would do this is because I could potentially have data for, sales data for a particular month or date, but not another date. And we want to compare, apples to apples. So I like to create just my own data table or date table. So I'm going to do that by going to our model here. Back to our home page, go to modeling. We're going to create a new table. And I'm going to call this date, or dim dates, sorry. Doesn't really matter what it's called, as long as it makes some logically makes sense to you. So dim date, and I'm going to use a function that's built into Power BI called calendar auto. And I'm just going to close this off. What this is going to do is it's smart enough to go out and look at our data. And it's created this date column. As you can see, it's created a hierarchy with year, quarter, month, day already in it. So that's great. So I'm just going to select that date column, and we're going to select. So 2014 to 2018 was our data set. So it's, as you can see, it's created basically a date for every one of these. And we have our date column in here, but I like to add extra columns. So I'm just going to add a new column into here. And I'm going to use DAX functionality once again. So new column. We're going to call this new column, we're going to get the month as an example, equals, put a bracket. So dim date is where we want this from. Oh, sorry, from our date, dim date column. And what do we want to return? Month. I should have put the word month in front of here. Apologize. So month in front of that. Then we just close this off. And what this is going to do is it's going to return the month number to us of the date column. So as you can see, January's, obviously month 1, November, month 11, on and on. So do the same thing. I'll add another column. And we're going to call this one, we're going to return the year. So we'll call this year equals year So once again, our dim date column. And what do we return? Close that off. So it's returning the year associated with our month, with our date. I can also do something like if I wanted to return the month name. Once again, I can add a new column again. So for this, I'm going to call this month name. And what do we want to return? Well, month name is going to be format. Use a DAX function, the value, and then the format. So the value is going to be our table where we're getting the date from. So dim date is going to be our date. And the format that we want to return this as will be MMM for short month name. Close that off and hit enter. As you can see, it's returned Jan for January, February, March. So as you can see, we're now building our date column. The other important thing is for month, we may want to change the data types of these columns. So right now, month is a whole number. We probably want that to be text. Same thing with year. We want that to be text. And month name is already text. Okay, so I have a column. Now I've got to create a relationship between this dim date table and my main date table. So I'm just going to go to relationships again. And we're going to select dim date here. So that's in here. We want to create a relationship between our date column and our main data set, our main data table. Which is document date. And we want to create a relationship to date. So I'm just going to drag that over. And here's a relationship between those two tables. So I have the date, month, year, and created a relationship to document date. The other important thing is we can do something. If I was to drag the month onto here and create a want to create a slicer. As you can see, it's now sorting this by the first digit of the month. So 1, 10, 11, 12. So I'll start with 1 and on and on. Not great. I'd rather have this 1, 2, 3, that sort of order. So the easiest way to do that, I find, is if we select our month column or month value in here, and there's this sort by column. If we select, we want to sort our month column by month name, or sorry, month. If we dragged month name onto here, we would have the same problem. So I'm just going to hit delete on here for a second, and we drag month name. As you can see, A, then D, then F, whatever, on and on, right? So not the right order that we want. So if I select month name and say I want to sort that by month instead, and we delete that. So month, we're going to change that to be, so this is a text value. We're going to change this back to a number, so a whole number. And if I was to now drag month name as being sorted by month, if we drag that onto our canvas, as you can see, I have January, February, March, April, May, June. So proper order that I want. I find if you drag this on here and then try to make changes, it doesn't always stick. So you have to take off the value off your canvas and drag it back on for the value to stick properly. So now I could do something like such as I have a slicer here as an example, but I could easily drag some values from my main data set. So I could bring extended price as an example onto here, and I could change this into a matrix report, and what I would want to do is drag the month name as an example into the matrix. So now I have a breakdown by month. I could drag month name into columns, so I have column layout, and I could also drag year into here as an example. So I have 2018 and month name. I can drill down into that to see the values that make up that particular year, drill back up into a particular year. So the other important thing to make note of working with your dim date or your date table is that you want to set mark as a date table. Make sure that is set so that it is a date table, and it's going to ask you what column is your date. Obviously, in our case, it's date. Validates it, makes sure it's a date, and we hit OK. That then allows you to work with that data properly. Next, we're going to cover time-based calculations. So on my home tab, I have new quick measure and new measure columns. So what this allows you to do is if I click, I want to make sure I'm in the right table when creating these measures as well. So what I make sure I'm on like my sales line items table as an example at this point, and then I'm going to click new quick measure. So I'm going to select the drop down. Now I could do like average per category. We're going to work with time based, but I could also do filtered values, quick measures. So I could do year to date, quarter to date, month to date, running totals, addition, subtraction type things, or text based quick measures. So I'm going to start off with year-to-date total. So we're going to select that. And the next thing is what is my base value? So that's going to be from my sales line items table, and it's going to be my extended price. So I'm just going to drag that into here. And then the date, I'm going to select that from my date table. I'm just going to drag the date into here and hit OK at this point. So this has created a new measure for us called extended price year-to-date. Not the best name, so I'm just going to rename this. We're going to call this sales year to date. So now I have a sales year to date. Now it's written the sort of DAX for us in this particular case. So we have now sales year to date. I can now drag this into here. I'm now getting sales year to date. Once again, I could easily, apply a filter to this. Here's our sales year to date, but I could say I want to see January and February's data. Well, I can't really do that with that slicer, so I'm just going to quickly modify that. We're going to say turn on the select all option or in multi-select. So once we have our time-based measurement created, we can drag that onto the canvas. So as an example, I'm just going to create a matrix report. So I'm just going to start off by dragging our extended price onto the canvas. We're going to make this into a matrix report, and then I'm going to drag our month name into as a row as an example. So we have our months here with extended price, and I can also drag our new sales year to date value. We want that to be to the right of our extended price. So as you can see, we have our sales. We have a running year-to-date number, as you can see. So 32 plus the $400, $4,300, and on, plus the 22 is 26, as you can see. So obviously it's working. That's a quick little visual test for us. So I can just modify that and add whatever values, but these time-based quick columns or quick measures or any measurement column is very, very powerful in Power BI. It allows us to do all sorts of things. So once again, new quick measure, and you can do things like, variance from one year to another as an example, using this, or as a percentage of total sales, percentage difference. So it's all going to be based on what your date sort of time-based values are on your. So once again, I can use my slicer. I can just turn on January or February or a few of these and just see the values for that. Something else that's important is when building your data model is, and I'll just go back to our relationships here for a second. So right now, I have our main table, which is sales line items, and then I have a dimension table. That's why I put DIM in front of this, but this is basically a dimension date, and I have a region, which is sort of a dimension as well. It's important to, what I like to do is create as many dimensions off my data. So looking at my normal data set, I might do something like create a dimension for country or customer class. Item class would be another dimension I would create off of these. So the quickest way I found to do this, or easiest way, is just go back to my main model here, and we're just going to select new table, and we're going to call this one country as an example, equals, and we're going to say distinct, and we're then going to select our sales line. So I clicked on something. So sales, I just started typing part of it. So sales line items table, select country. Close that off. Hit enter. So as you can see, this has now created a country table for us. And if we look at that table, so I have country. Now I have, Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand. So we'll call it country. If I go to the relationships, I'm going to see that it has created this country table all by itself, but not necessarily created a relationship for me. So I can do a couple things. I can click on this manage relationships, and you can actually select auto detect, and if the column's name match, it might detect them. So I can just click auto detect. Let's try it, see what we get back. No new relationships found. We're going to create a new one, or I can just drag the columns. So creating a new relationship, I want country. So country column, create a relationship to our sales line items table, country. As you can see, it's found that column, one-to-many relationship, and hit OK at this point. So it's created that relationship for us. And I can close that. It's also created the nice line for us, and so that's where I wanted to stop today in regards to creating time-based calculation, creating dimension tables, working with